Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Today I have back with me Abhinav Pandya, who has been a guest in the past. For those of you who don't remember, Abhinav is the founder and CEO of 𝗍𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 Foundation. He has a Master's in Arts from Cornell University, USA, and a Bachelor in Arts from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. Abhinav Pandya is a visiting faculty with the School of International Cooperation, Security and Strategic Languages, Rashtriya Raksha University since September 2021. He is also the founder and CEO of 𝗍𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 Foundation, an India-based geopolitical and security affairs think tank. Mr. Pandya has a master's degree in public administration from Cornell University, US, and a graduate degree from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. He is the author of the books Radicalization in India, An Exploration, and Terror Financing in Kashmir. Previously, Mr. Pandya was a consultant with the Inter-American Development Bank, Washington, D.C., and the International Labour Organization. For a period, he served as the advisor to the then Lieutenant Governor Satyapal Malik. I hope I got all that right. Abhinav, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar, namaskar. Thank you, Sree. Thank you very much for inviting me. Just a little two things. So it was Mr. Satyapal Malik used to be the governor. This was before the abrogation of Article 370.
Oh, I see. So he was the governor, not Lieutenant Governor.
Yes.
I stand corrected.
And yes, and my organization's name is Usanas Foundation. So Usanas is not an abbreviation. It's a Sanskrit word. It's the name of Shukracharya, Ushanas. It's from that. So the organization's name is Usanas Foundation. Yes. Thank you.
Learn something new every day. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
So Abhinav, in our past conversations, we have talked about it right through the abrogation of 370. Even before that, we've had conversations. Now, it's been a while since we had you back on our channel. I'm very happy that you could find time. Now, I'm coming straight to the point. So we were talking about what should be the cutoff year. The last time we talked, if you remember, for actually computing the census or the population, because on that only the seat allocation was going to happen. People are talking about, they were using 2001, but there was a thought that 1981 perhaps was more accurate because it was prior to the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits. I don't remember which year got taken as the reference for this delimitation. Walk us through this thing. What happened and how come Jammu got only 6 seats? I thought it should have gotten more.
Yes. First, asking some of your questions in a very objective manner, then I'll just get down to some of the more fundamental issues. If it's about the cutoff year, I guess 1981 seems to be the most perfect one because you had all the minorities in Kashmir, you had Kashmiri Pandits, and you had Sikhs also, and you had those Muslims who are nationalists, who are loyal to India, who are not like whose loyalties are with our country. They were all intact in that region. Okay, and the overall environment, separatist trends were there, but the militancy had not come, so there was a relatively freer environment of answering your question during the census. Because after 1981, even organizing regular census became extremely difficult. Okay, so from if you ask me, 1981 is the ideal benchmark. Because in 1990, what kind of census do you expect in that condition of militancy? Again in 2000, you had local state governments. Later, you had Abdullah's government. It was all most of these governments had a major penetration of Pakistani intelligence agencies. So under such circumstances, even the kind of censuses which take place, their credibility is highly doubtful. Objectively speaking. So 1981 is the benchmark. And then what was your other question? Yes.
The question was, what year was taken as the benchmark for computation of the delimitation?
Yes. Yes, so they have taken 2011 as the benchmark year, and I mean for that, very practical and immediate reasons have been cited because 2011 is the year when we had our last census. 2021, because of the corona and all these things, I guess there are some issues. So government is left with the only one option of using 2011 as the benchmark, as the standard criteria for this delimitation. But then again, I would say that, I mean, if you ask on ethical grounds and logical grounds, I mean, I wouldn't accept 2011 as the right benchmark. I guess we should go back to 1981. I mean, because what about the Kashmiri Pandits? And then migration, slow migration has also taken in the case of Sikhs. Subtle migration has also taken in the region of Doda, Kishtwar. It's not just the Kashmiri Pandits who have been thrown out or who were expelled. There used to be a strong Sikh minority. Even now they are facing threats. Most recently, there was a Sikh Sarpanch, Narinder Kaur. She was attacked. I mean, Lashkar terrorist exploded a grenade at her house. So these people are also facing a lot of threats.
So the delimitation, if it was done based on 1981, I think would have gotten more seats for Jammu and perhaps more representation for some of these minorities who were at that time residing in the Kashmir Valley. So I get the idea. So 2011 became the basis for which this is done. And now we have 43 for Jammu, 47 for Kashmir. Now it is still possible that the valley would still trump over Jammu. If I look at the populations of these two regions, it seems to me still that Jammu should have got more. How was that done?
Oh, well, certainly if you look at some purely superficial criteria, like, on the face value, okay, certainly Valley has much more population. It is densely populated. Then there are quote unquote religious factors for increasing the population. There were religious reasons for throwing a community out of that area. There have been religious reasons for increasing the population of a particular community, again, quote unquote, So I guess we should not get into this population debate. It can be very controversial, and as they say, baat niklegi to fir dur talak jayegi. But frankly speaking, I would say that I guess it needs to be seen beyond the simple population criteria. There has been a long history of systematic discrimination and marginalization of the interest of the Jammu region. If you long back during the era of Maharaja, Sheikh Abdullah alleged Maharaja that he was dictatorial, he was feudal, and after Maharaja's dismissal, Delhi governments, mostly led by Nehru and the other people, they have adopted a favorable attitude towards the Kashmir region, and the Jammu region has suffered a very strong discrimination and marginalization. And I can show you statistics. Most recently, when I was working there, can you imagine in the state home ministry, the home department, out of 13 secretaries, you had 9 secretaries and they were all Kashmiri Muslims. Now, if that is the case, what kind of SRO distribution, what kind of aid do you expect for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, for the people of Jammu region? If a soldier dies from the Jammu region, he is liable to get the state compensation, state aid. And if your home ministry has 9 secretaries who are Kashmiri Muslims, with their sympathy is doubtful and loyalty is also, like, I would say, suspect, okay, in many cases. I'm not saying for all of them. Then such processes of rewarding them, or such process of doling out your state aid and other packages, they get delayed. Besides that, as we saw in the case of Roshni Act, systematically people of a particular religion were brought to Jammu region and they were settled. They were given large tracts of land with long strategic goals in mind. They wanted to create a particular community stronghold around in the outskirts of Jammu, which is just 12 kilometers away from the border, so that if the advancing armies of enemy get inside your border, get inside our territory, they find a favorable population which is ready to support them in terms of logistics, in terms of movement and shelter. So these things, all these things, how was it created? You had these state governments which were dominated by Kashmir-based parties, Kashmir-based politicians. They brought a group of, I would say, land revenue officials who had their sympathies towards the other side or who were corrupt, and they allotted, fake land pattas to the people, of a particular religious community just to alter the demography of the Jammu region. There have been reports, long reports on this issue. 𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 Commission, which is a Jammu-based NGO, and let me remind you, 𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 Commission has nothing to do with RSS or BJP. Okay? They have, come out with a long report of this or the demography altering mission of the local state elements, at the behest of Pakistan, for some long-term strategic aims. Besides that, if you see the Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir region, over the last 10 years, there was some statistics. I have written that in my book also. They got 16, I guess 1% of the revenue, something, but commensurate with the expenditure which they got, the total development or the total population was very less, as compared to the other states. I mean, they got much more revenue and development funds from the central government, but the total population was way less as compared to the other states. This is the whole idea. Where were all those funds spent? So I feel that there are deep-rooted systemic issues of the Jammu region, and now I must say that this idea of expelling Hindus possibly is not simply confined to the valley. You can see the Doda-Kishtwar region, where systematically Hindu leaders are being targeted. In 2018, there were killings of some senior Hindu leaders. Okay? And this menace is spreading to that area. Very soon, if you don't have proper measures in place, you will find another exodus of Hindus from the Doda-Kishtwar region. So you need representation from Jammu region. And even during the PDP-BJP government, if you see, you had around, BJP was the partner, but still the power center was always in Kashmir and it was controlled by them. And another important factor which comes here in play is that it's not just about the regional divide. When you have government administration and the state structures dominated by Kashmir-based political parties and Kashmir-based politicians, actually there's this very intense religious divide. Their approach has been very communal. Secondly, their loyalties, and I'm very blunt and very open when I say this, a large number of them have their loyalties towards Pakistan. You can just see Mehbooba Mufti's party, they have strong ties with Jamaat-e-Islam. What is Jamaat-e-Islam? Jamaat-e-Islam is a terrorist organization. It's a Pakistan's proxy. You can read Bashar Asid's book, 𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗀, where he discusses that Mr. Mehbooba Mufti and her father, Mufti Muhammad Said, they openly used to meet with terrorist leaders, and in fact, terrorist commanders were visiting their homes. Wahid Para is a very important PDP leader. Wahid Para is facing charges and he is in jail under for terror funding right now. He was, he has been charged. I'm not saying that it's proved, but yes, certainly the charge sheet says that he was funneling money to Naveed Babu, who is the HM terrorist. Muhammad Akbar Lone, who is the NC politician, he once said that, he raised slogans in the favor of Pakistan. So when they talk about representation and population figures, they should also throw a light on what they have done and where their loyalties stand. So certain other factors they have to be brought in. And I guess Jammu needs to be, even purely, if not for purely democratic factors, for some very strong strategic reasons, we need better representation, powerful representation from Jammu.
So that leads to the obvious question: why keep them together? Why not have two separate states, Jammu and Kashmir?
Well, this was always something which I personally favored. That you needed three union territories in this region: Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh. But then there were certain segments who said that, if you Ladakh has already been separated, because Ladakh was for years, for decades, Ladakh faced that repression and discrimination. Now they are very happy. But then some elements even in the government, they always said that if you separate Jammu and Kashmir, will be totally isolated, and then you'll have this, you kind of legitimize or give an official stamp on the.
Okay. Fine. I'm going to stop you right there. Okay, so let us say that we keep them together. I'm sorry, you'll finish your thought, because I have an immediate thing. I have been talking to many Kashmiri Pandits, Kashmiri Hindus, people from Kashmir, after the abrogation of 370, and not one has expressed hope that they'll go back and settle, because they're still afraid that these guys will wipe them out. They've already had one instance where everything has been purged. Their properties were sold for a song to 4 or 5 groups. They know, they remember, they said, I can give you all the records. You just have to take it back from these people for the low price that they sold us the thing. However, they have to go back and live in areas which are completely surrounded by Muslims. So the problem, I'm coming to the problem. So the solution is to resettle retired army Jawans, their families, for a period of 10 years. A number that Dr. Swami quoted was twice the number of people that were displaced, which is 10 lakhs. He said, resettle for 10 lakhs to a 10 lakh ex-servicemen in Kashmir area, stabilize areas like sort of, it would be like enclaves, if you will, make enclaves where people can go and stay securely, and slowly extract out the army population and put back the Kashmiri Pandit. So at the worst case, there'll still be 1 for 1. Retired army people living there for every Kashmiri Pandit. This is the stabilization that needs to be done. Now, I'm hearing that something to this effect has started just now. Any idea on that?
Frankly speaking, I have no idea on, if on these developments, and I'm sure even if these things are happening, then they must be under the cover, and I think they should stay under the cover. And personally, if you ask me, I always prefer that we should have had like union territories, Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh. Okay? That's a better way, because Jammu region has a lot of, this sense of discrimination and frustration. They feel that they didn't get anything out of this application of Article 370, because if the outsiders happen, they would mostly settle in the Jammu region, with the jobs of the people of Jammu. They wouldn't go to Kashmir because of the conflict-related problems, which I guess are genuine. So it would have been much. We had 3 union territories, and Kashmir in particular should have a different governance mechanism, I guess. Certainly, one of those things, it's not just Kashmiri Pandits should certainly go back, they have the right, but way above that, there are very strong strategic and security related considerations, which is why you want to safeguard that area. And to do that, you need people like, who can who can protect the place. I would say that it's not just about Kashmiri Pandits. Suppose if it's a separate union territory, if militants come in that area, there are many local Kashmiri Muslims like these days. After the abrogation of Article 370, they are openly coming out, local Kashmiris, and professing their loyalties towards India. No, but they are still scared. Why? Because they are living in the society. You have OGWs scattered in the society. You have militants scattered in the society. And once their names are reported to these fellows, they get shot. So if you bring more nationalist voices, which includes people from the armed forces, or I would say even nationalist Muslims in that area, then they would provide some protection, some safeguard to these nationalist voices among the Kashmiri Muslims. So it's crucial to bring people, especially people with some kind of a military training, army training in that area, and make them settle there. Not only for the security of Kashmiri Pandits, but also for the safety, security, and freedom of the local Kashmiri Muslims, because a large number of them, now they realized earlier also, this whole Pakistan's terror business was a large part of it was based on threat, and another, I would say the remaining segment was based on this whole money business, lucrative, and the religious ideology. Okay, so in that, when all these 3 things became the mainstream narrative, the people who were loyal towards India, they also, they were also swept into that. Okay, and that includes people from the minority communities also. You can see, like, even many Sikhs and even many local Kashmiri Pandits also joining that bandwagon. But once you bring more nationalist voices, like in the form of settling army people, okay, these pro-India nationalist voices, even among the locals, will get strengthened. And but I don't know if anything is happening on that front. But if anything is happening,
so there is. We're going to put a show more in the show more section of this video. We're going to put a link about that. What the link said was that Kashmiri Pandit army veterans were being the first housing development of Kashmiri Pandit army veterans has taken place. I want everyone. It doesn't matter which part of army you served in. I mean, army, air force, navy. It doesn't matter. The point here is nationalism, and that it needs to reflect that, and only then this part of the region will come back to normalcy. This is just my thought, Abhinav. If in conclusion, if you want to say something, please feel free, and then we can call this a wrap.
Well, I want to say that I mean, definitely it's a welcome step that they have given, increase the number of seats in the Jammu region. But I think they need to do a lot more on this front. Still you have 47 seats with the valley, and the Jammu region has 43 seats, and the dangers of radicalization are much more stronger. Like especially after the Taliban's return in Afghanistan, you're going to see a very different variety of militancy in Kashmir. You can see the signs even now. You have this concept of hybrid militant coming in the Kashmir Valley now, where it's very difficult to differentiate between a militant and a civilian. You have a student visiting a degree college or a professional course or an IAS coaching in the daytime, and then he is given a weapon by an OGW, which is used to kill a person. Then he comes back, gives the weapon back to the OGW, and then he resumes his normal life. I mean, a lot more needs to be done to bring Kashmir back to the mainstream. This is just one step. Empowering Jammu is just one step.
Thank you very much, Abhinav. Let's hope and pray that things will move in a more congruent direction, in a way that things come back to normalcy. Certainly, the normal people in Kashmir don't seem to, want to align themselves with Pakistan. But until Pakistan splits into four, that's the only thing I see as the real solution. India doesn't want to annex any land; that they can keep the land.
See, I see even if we don't want it, okay. It is the only solution, is the only destiny which Pakistan will ultimately meet. Interestingly, if you see in Kashmir, the valley-based politicians are using the same religious narrative. Now, if you remember, go back a few days back, Mehbooba Mufti, she was addressing a rally and she said that, "Ye Delhi wale hame बाबर की औलाद समझते हैं, यहाँ पर हमें कश्मीरी और पहाड़ी बनकर के नहीं लड़ना चाहिए, कश्मीरी पहाड़ी गुजर नहीं है, ये तो हमें बाबर की औलाद समझते हैं." Now the fact is that once again, this is the point which I wanted to highlight. Okay, it's good that it has come to my mind now. The discrimination is not just with the Jammu region. The discrimination is also within the Kashmir region, and the differences are stark and acute. The people from Pahadi community, Gujar community, Shia community, they have been discriminated for the last 5 to 6 decades. The way the constituencies function currently in the Kashmir Valley make sure that the people from the Gujar community do not get representation. If you go and look at the number of people from the Gujar community or Pahadi community who are councillors, who are member of parliament, or who are MLAs, it's insignificant. Their representation in the state academia, education, administration is negligible. And there's this acute sense of frustration and anger. Even in the Kashmir region, the entire political power, administrative power, academic clout has been cornered by the so-called Kashmiri Muslims. And even among the Kashmiri Muslims, it remains confined to the Sayyids, the people who came from outside, people with surnames like Gilani. Even among the Kashmiri Muslims, you have commoners like, Tantre, Dar, who are common people, local people who converted, they have faced the discrimination. So these valley-based politicians, they are scared now that, with these things like delimitation and all, these internal differences will come out in the open. One more delimitation is required. It's not just Jammu where you need delimitation, but even in the Kashmir Valley region, you need to, adjust seats in such a manner that you have Gujars and Pahadis getting more representation, and they are nationalist voices in Kashmir. Now, if the constituencies were created in such a fabricated, artificial, completely senseless manner, just to keep them out of the, the structures of power. Now, if you make those changes in the Kashmir Valley, you'll have better representation from the Gujar, Shia community, and then they are nationalist voices. They'll weaken the separatist voices. So this is the reason why these valley-based political groups oppose delimitation now.
I have made 2 trips to the valley. one in 1974 and one in 1979. In 74, things were much more friendly. People were quite friendly, but the difference in 79 was stark. It struck me when somebody said, "Oh, aap to India se aaye hue hain." I'm like, what? This is and also the way they treated you. You were a tourist. They wanted your money. They didn't want you. I mean, it was very black and white. And I barely stayed 3 days or something like that. And I was glad to get out of there back to Jammu. It left a not so good taste in my mouth. 74 was very pleasant. 79, not so much. So I can see that these things were beginning to go back. What I can't fathom is how the center completely ignored this problem for this long, because what the BJP is trying to do today, in my opinion, is to undo much of this stuff. It's going to take time.
So center, right from the beginning, first of all, they had a very, very pathetic understanding of, I would say, geopolitical and security concerns, and this region, Kashmir region itself. Okay, I mean, just one very practical example. The entire Kashmir is handled by one joint secretary in Home Ministry. And many a times, these people, the joint secretary is from Kerala, is from Tamil Nadu. Okay? He has not visited the streets of Pulwama and so forth. But you cannot understand Kashmir. Kashmir is such a layered place that people have 7 to 8 layers in the Kashmiri mind. One adage goes in Kashmir that if you find the local militant, if you beat him for 3 to 4 days, he wouldn't speak anything, or he would start revealing things in tits and bits. If you get a Pakistani militant, he will immediately start speaking everything. He wouldn't get beaten. But Kashmiri militant, he'll continue, keep on getting, bashings and lashings, and after like 3-4 days, he'll start opening up his mouth. Why? Because his mind is so layered that even he doesn't know what to speak and what to hide. So it's a very complex place. Once Shankaracharya was visiting Kashmir, and one of his disciple told Shankaracharya that we have come very far from Kerala, like the sea coast. We have come very far from sea coast. Shankaracharya retorted, "Don't worry, my child. This place is much deeper than the sea."
Excellent. And with that, we call this a wrap. Thank you very much, Abhinav. And let's hope that we can have you back again very soon so we can talk further about what is going on there. Certainly, one of the things that I have no news about is the amount of subsidies that have been given to the region, and have those been withdrawn now that 370 is gone? I don't know. Maybe you can do some research next time. We can talk about it. The subsidies were just astronomical in the 70s when I asked them how much does a kilo of chini or sugar cost you, and they said 44 paisa. It was 10 times more outside, 10 times more. So it was unbelievable how cheap things were for them. I mean, for once, hit the pocketbooks. That might, make things come to normalcy much faster. Again, let's try and get together again on some of these commercial and economic challenges, and we'll have another discussion on that. Thank you very much, and namaskar.
Namaskar.